Hi, Mom. I wanted to say I love you. Oh, I love you, Mom. You was right. Y'all is the only family I got. You know, you've been the only one that's been there for me. Oh, can you tell the kids and Mimi I said I love them? He kept telling me to stop and I did it. He kept telling me and I didn't listen. I really hope you get this video. You might not hear from me no more. I just wanted to let you know I love you.
So there's this video on YouTube of this child with mental health issues and behavioral issues throwing rocks at his mother's car. And then there's a follow-up video where it shows his mouth all bloodied and he's at the Department of Health and Services. So I do want to talk about this video because there is a bunch of things to talk about. That first of all, I'm actually really proud of the family recording his behavior because, you know, you always need to kind of make, you know, evidence of a person and how they are behaving. Because, you know, there's a lot of times when people who have mental health issues, you know, misbehave and you guys say, hey, this is what they're doing in a certain situation. And sometimes it's also important to show the lead up to, you know, why they're behaving like that. Like if they're being bullied or instigated, or if they have a thing where they just snap because you don't know what's going on with them mentally, or if they're like instigated and something stimulates them and that upsets them. Like if they watch like a movie or they have something taken away from them, all that's really, really important. So I kind of, you know, give credit to the family to record that. I also think it's very appropriate that that he was removed, because there's a lot of times when there are family members that are like, oh, well, my son has a mental health issue, or my son has a problem, or my child has a problem, and oh, well, I'm gonna let it go, or I'm gonna let it slide because I love and care about them. I don't want to see them in DHS or other things, because obviously, I don't know the story of what happened to Rob Reiner, but I've heard people talk about that, and they said like he had a son that killed him, but his son had like drug or mental health issues. And if somebody has a pattern of violent behavior, it doesn't matter if they're your son or daughter or child or whatever, really, you have to respond appropriately. And then the other issue is that if the mother did not respond and have this recorded, DSH, Child Protective Services, can remove her other children and say, hey, you know, and what are you doing with a son that has violent tendencies and other children that you have, and you're not like recording or bring this forward. Like this kid, he needs to be recorded, and they need to take his ass out of there. You know, fuck him in the sense that he needs to be held accountable for his actions. And that's kind of like the third part of this video is, you know, fuck him in a way, because there are a lot of times in this country where people have mental health issues and there are no consequences for their actions, or people say, oh, well, you got to be understanding. And that's very important. And I know like a few weeks ago, there was this video of this white kid using the N-word, and he had mental health issues. You know, that's not okay, but that's one thing. But if there are somebody who has mental health issues and they throw rocks at somebody's car, you know, which can potentially kill somebody or cause bodily harm or other things like that, that's a way, way another thing. And there are many parents that will say something like, okay, I'm not going to do anything about this because I don't want to see my children in and I don't want to see my children taken away, or no, I know how to handle my child when I don't know how to handle my child. Or, when I got in trouble in high school a couple of times, my third year, because I was going through a lot of hard times. I was going through emotional abuse. I was going through like a lot of really rough shit. And I remember how whenever I got in trouble with the principal, my dad would always be calling him like a lawyer and be like, hey, you know what, Byron has autism. Byron doesn't understand his actions. You need to keep giving him chances. And like the third time, the principal basically said, hey, you know what, fuck you. He needs to be suspended. And the reason why he did that was because my dad was doing this really bad thing of saying, hey, if you have a mental illness, it's a get out of jail free card. If you have autism or whatever, it allows you to not be held accountable for your actions. It allows you not to be disciplined. Oh, well, people need to be understanding your mental health issues and say, hey, that's what's triggering your behavior, so you can never be held accountable, really. And that's not good, really, because, again, this was my dad's child, and my dad responded that way, really. He could have getting himself really, really hurt, if he said, oh, well, I'm going to ignore the rock throwing at my car because I think I can handle my mentally ill son, or say, oh, well, it's autism, or oh, it's this disability, give him another chance. There's a lot of that in America, really. And then the other problem is it doesn't teach the child any form of accountability. It says, oh, well, we're overlooking, and then it's ableism. And I know it's very, very harsh, but I work in psych wards. I've actually seen things where kids misbehave, and sometimes the nurse says like "fuck you" and whatever to them because they're hitting people, they're spitting on people. And then I remember like one time there was this mentally ill kid that had to be restrained, and he was saying something like, "I'm claustrophobic. Part of my plan is that people don't get too close to me." And one of the nurses said, "Go fuck yourself," because this kid was like fighting and biting and spitting on people and vandalizing stuff, and it was okay. And I felt that was okay in a way because that's trying to teach him you don't get accommodations, you don't get special stuff, you don't get people respecting you when you are hurting other people, really. And like I've said before, and I'll say it again, if you accommodate, if you let things go, if you don't hold mentally ill people accountable for their actions, if mentally ill people can't control themselves, they need to be in programs, or they need to be in institutions that control them. Because if you don't do that, they're going to walk around doing whatever the fuck they want, really. And that's not society we live in. And that's not a good society. That's not a good society for anybody. And I'm sorry. But we have to have a society of law and order. We can't have a society where everybody does whatever the fuck they want, really. Or somebody has a kid with a mental health issue, they're like they're the public criminal, really. That's not okay. And then the other thing is DSH is him being taken by the Department of Public Health and Services, DHS. First of all, I don't know why he got an injury, how that happened. It could be self-inflicted. That could be another thing. It could be something where I think what the kid's trying to say is, hey, I got this injury when I was with DHS. So I want to talk about this. That number one, we don't know the origin of the injury. So if he could have self-inflicted that just to he could have self-inflicted that just to get attention. The other thing is that he's talking to a camera, so this is kind of like, you kind of have to wonder if the video is real or fake, really. Because honestly, the problem is, too, that, if somebody's, like, bloodied or whatever, there wouldn't be, like, surveillance footage of them talking like they're on an intercom or whatever, really, to the public, really. Like, hey, or hey, mom, this is a video of me, this is whatever, really. Like, it wouldn't get that far, really. Usually if you have any type of a physical injury in these type of situations, like even in the psych ward, they'll tend to your injury, and they'll make sure the injury doesn't continue. So if you're inflicting harm on yourself, they'll restrain you, or they'll restrain other people have hurt you and stuff like that, really. So I'm not sure how he got the injury. The other thing, too, is that Department of Health and Family Services, I think that's way different than a psychiatric hospital. But I'm not sure, again, what happens in that. If he was, like, apprehended, and I think there was another story that he was put into foster care or something like that, and he got beaten up or something like that. But the point of it is that we don't know the origin of the injury. But I do want to just speculate that if it was something where staff were rough on him, or other people like patients or kids these days were rough on him, then there's two sides of it. That number one, sometimes when you are put in a psychiatric ward or when you are taken away as a child, sometimes it's almost like whatever happens to you, and there's not a lot of lawsuits that you can do and whatever. Usually it's thrown out in court, or usually people say, okay, you know what, how are you going to sue kids really? Like, because there's times when, again, I remember like when I was a kid, I had a younger brother and he would kick me in the neck a bunch of times. And I also remember, one time my brother wasn't paying attention and he like slashed my arm with his like sharp fingernail. So should I sue my father, or should I sue my brother? Or if my dad was babysitting another kid and that happened, really, there's a lot of times where people won't file lawsuits or whatever, really. There's a lot of times when that wouldn't happen, really. I remember like my brother went to a program called Chapel Haven, and there was a fire because somebody wasn't paying attention that caused a grease fire, and that person got badly scarred. So there was no lawsuit. There was a car accident there, and nobody there were no lawsuits or whatever, really. So so yeah, yeah, so yeah, that's also kind of that does happen, really, where there's a lot of like, there's a lot of like, like no filing of charges, because sometimes people may be like, oh well, the kid got himself in that situation, really, so parents don't want to file for that reason. And then the other thing too is that it's expensive, because obviously these programs are funded by the government, so you have to get a lawyer, and they have infinite money, really. And then the other part of it is that sometimes when they take your child, sometimes there are like, rules saying, hey, he's in the custody. So that just means whatever happens to that child and whatever injury they get, it gets really overlooked, because they're like, oh, well, you're in that person's custody, so whatever happens, almost like you can't sue the military if you go into the military and you get injured in war or beaten up in boot camp. It's that type of mentality, really. But it's an ultimate video of actions do have consequences. It's an ultimate video of saying, the family did the right thing by recording his behavior, and the family did the right thing by saying, hey, we got to take you away from the family. Because, like I said, there is a lot of times where, this would result in cooling the kid down, and then they just have dinner together and they move on to the next day. And then maybe something worse happens or something doesn't happen. And then also you have to think about your other children, because there's a lot of times where, you may have 3 children, but one of them has behavioral issues and has this type of violent tendency. And those kids grow up with trauma. Those kids grow up with feelings like, oh, well, my other sibling has double standards, or, oh, well, I don't want to have children, or, oh, well, you know what, if I have kids, I'm going to move across the country away from my family or my parents because they have this kid that's violent, really. There's a lot of things that it puts other children through, really. Like, I remember with my older brother, in middle school, he had some violent behavior, and I remember, like, my dad choking my older brother, my dad putting him in a wrist lock, and other things like that. And I think really my dad was almost like, it wasn't appropriate for my dad, really. But my dad's mentality is like, I'm the dad, I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I can take care of you, and even if I have to be rough with you, whatever, really. But I remember one of the reasons why I don't want to have a family, or one of the reasons why I'm afraid to have a family or have pets, is because I grew up with domestic violence, and that was a classic example. And that wasn't right. And then there are many times where I've even told my dad about some of the inappropriate behavior that my brother has done, and he's done nothing about it, really. Like, it just goes over his head, really. But he has no problem saying, oh, well, you have mental health issues, Byron, you need medication, you're behind socially, when when I grew up with a brother, even in my 20s, like with a brother with a lot of just inappropriate behavior, and my dad overlooks it. Like you have a brother that walks around naked, that has a bunch of sexually inappropriate behavior, and your dad, like, it's over his head really. But when it comes to the subject of me having mental health issues because of the response to all that behavior and him doing nothing about it, he's more concerned about me putting a funnel down my throat and being put on pills and then saying, oh, well, you have a mental illness. It's like cause and effect, really. But there's a lot of parents who do that, where they don't care about how it affects other siblings or how other siblings feel in danger. So this mother recording this kid's behavior, absolutely. And I have to even say this, I know it's mean, but fuck him, fuck him, because people with mental health issues need to be held accountable for their actions, because I've seen a lot of times in my life where mentally ill people can do whatever the hell they want. Like I knew this girl in high school who would lie about being raped. And I remember one time there was a story where she went to court and she said something like she doesn't know how to say her name, and the judge gave the family like more and more weeks for her to come up with her story, and then she would like bail. Like this was kind of like something that people were talking about, but it was because she had a mental illness on her record, and she kept like no showing the court, lying about being raped on a bunch of different guys. And this is why mentally ill people need to be held accountable for their actions, because if not, it's going to be a world where if somebody has a mental illness, they can do whatever the fuck they want, really. It's never right, really. When my principal got me suspended, said, hey, I was doing enough bad shit, I need to be suspended, that's the way to do it. When I was a kid, my dad would smack me, he would spank me, he would take away privileges. He would punish me, he would scream and yell, he would intimidate me, he would smack me for small infractions. When he was that type of father, even though some of it was wrong and overreaction, and the borderline between abuse and discipline, I was at my best, really, because I was taught, you fuck up and there's consequences. You act antisocial, there's consequences, really. And we need to get back to that point. And if DHS and other people get involved to remove a child and you record the behavior of the child, so be it. This kid needs help. This kid needs to be reformed. This kid needs to be held accountable for his actions, because if not, this could have ended way, way worse. Or this could have ended with all the kids removed because they're like, oh, well, you know what, you just don't know how to control your children, and you let your mentally ill son do whatever the fuck he wants.